So welcome. So today's session, we're going to go through your conversion strategy secret weapon. Before we get started, I read this really interesting stat the other day, which I want to share with you all, which was that 2 out of 3 marketers don't feel confident that they're going to meet their revenue goals or their sale goals. 2 out of 3. That's 2/3 of us that don't feel confident in the goals that we're looking to achieve, which is absolutely wild. How many of us, put your hand up if you find that stat surprising? 2 out of 3 of us don't feel confident. So this is the topic we're going to go through today. Before we do so my name is Nick. My name is Nick Sibley. I'm a senior manager of product marketing at Siteimprove. Throughout my career, I've worked at a bunch of different industries, from manufacturing to where I'm now in technology. And my primary channel has always been content. It's really at the heart of what I've done, and is a passion for me. Before this, I thought I was going to start out working as a scientist with data and biology. And so facts are central points to this presentation for us to really account for where we are as an industry compared with where we think we are. And it's really interesting to address the mindsets that we have. The first stat that I want to reveal to you, which you might find surprising, is that 91% of the content that we produce doesn't reach the target audience. 91%. Like, think of yourself as content creators, or your team of content creators. 91% of their time doesn't result in any traffic, engagement, conversions, things that contribute to the metrics that we're all measured against. This is huge. Now consider this stat, and all of the time you spend producing the content that you do. Now let's imagine that you do acquire traffic. Whether you are a B2B brand, a B2C brand, okay, you've acquired the traffic and it's driven to your website. But the thing is, 50% of your traffic is lost if you haven't engaged in up to 8 seconds. Now the nuances of how long this is specifically going to take depends on your target audience. We know that Gen Z are a lot more, you could say, fickle, a lot less patient. But in general, 8 seconds. All of the activities that you do, put this together, the majority of your time results in a tiny amount of traffic that is engaged and driving conversions. This is the situation that we're in now. Now today we're gonna go through a few questions. The first is addressing what we just spoke about, which is, why am I not getting traffic or conversions? The second is, how has AI changed the landscape? There have been a lot of presentations today about AI, as we'd expect, generative AI. What the hell does that mean? What does this mean for us? And once we have that context, then we're going to go on to, what can I do to increase my conversions? So marketing, we're in a really difficult position because we frequently have to communicate with people that aren't in marketing. So we have to communicate the knowledge that we know in a way that people understand, that don't have the wealth of knowledge of marketing that we do. Think about when you interact with, say, your CEO or a senior leader that doesn't work in marketing. When they think about conversions, what they're thinking about is the amount of money that they're going to get. Right? They're thinking about that macro final conversion. What are the number of SQLs, MQLs? You know, what is that? But for us, what we know is there has to be a conversion at every single point, every single stage of the funnel. That is how we see conversions. We need to create content that cuts through the noise. If we're B2B, it's about getting your audience to recognize the challenge that they have, to identify with that, to know they need to solve it, and then push into the funnel. If it's B2C, it's often positioning yourself aligned with the aspirations that your target audience has, your personas have, in order to cut through and get them to engage with your brand. And then create more content which fuels them through the funnel. But the reality of where we are today is that conversions are getting harder, and this isn't just something we say to ourselves to help ourselves sleep at night. This is genuinely the case. What we're seeing is that there are more channels. Last month, TikTok released AR. It was ad search, like paid search. We now have this channel called Threads, which my Instagram is constantly telling me I need to be on. And what Gartner has found is that organizations, 62% of them, are now present on more channels this side of COVID than before. So it turns out there were some behavioral changes that we've experienced during that time. Now on top of that, the amount of content that's being produced is increasing. I used to be part of a content management system, and during that time we saw there was a steady increase in content that was produced over that time. But now we have generative AI, and everyone is talking about using it and leveraging it. And we know that that increase in content is only going to expedite. And finally, there is more competition. If you think about our friends across the pond in America, what they found is coming out of COVID, they had a record-breaking number of new businesses that were created. And that number is only increasing. So the fact of the matter is, there is more channels, more content, more conversions. And yet at the same time, the reverse is true for loyalty. The position we are in now is one of financial uncertainty. And so consumers are tightening their belts. We have consumers that are more price sensitive. As a side note, there's some really interesting research from Harvard Business Review about how you can use a hierarchy of needs and consider your audiences and how they will perceive their financial situation to influence your messaging and positioning. If you want to chat about that later, I'm in the booth over there. I'd love to discuss it. But we know that the consumers now, they're more savvy. Like the modern consumers, we are more skeptical. We expect marketing to call it as it is and have some humor in order for us to engage. There is less loyalty depending on your product. And what's also really interesting is that there is less consumer trust. I spoke to a Gartner analyst the other day. Her name was Nicole Green, and she was telling me about the consumer trust around ChatGPT. And she says, from a consumer point of view, the trust is less than 20% of how they consider the outcome from ChatGPT and what it is and what it does. Like, there is a massive amount of disinformation at the moment. There's so much information out there. I'd be really interested, how many of us have had a discussion, or argument, call it what you will, with someone else, and we had two contrasting points of view, and yet we found data that supported each of our views? How many? Put your hands up. Yeah. It's really hard these days to get down to what actually is the facts and really dive into, you have to dive into the sources to work that out. And so we're in a position where there is less trust around the content we produce. And frankly, there is less patience. From other generations, we have been trained to expect instant gratification. We have social media training us in short form content. We have doom scrolling that I'm sure many of us do more than we would like. And so the time that we have for our message to land is reduced, right? There is less patience. Now, in the situation that we are, what does this exacerbation mean when we are currently in the age of distraction? What are brands doing? Well, a lot of brands are turning to using AI to produce content. At a surface level, it makes sense. We've heard a lot about the opportunities today of doing so, and there are great ways to do this. But the fact of the matter is there are also risks in doing this. We're in a situation where there's just so much content out there that a lot of our consumers are fatigued. I found myself that I am trying to separate myself more from the digital world, to give myself time to recharge. And this is because we're fatigued. There is so much content out there that what the content brands are creating isn't cutting through. It's a sea of sameness. Now, creative agencies have been saying this for a long time, that brands need to be bolder with what they do. We need to have an opinion, we need to take a stance, we need to stand for something. Whether you agree with that or not, from a brand management point of view, I think what we can all agree on is the content that's produced through generative AI like ChatGPT, it's pretty bland. It's a great starting point. We need to tweak it. We need to make sure it actually means something in order for it to be effective and cut through that sea of sameness. And the final thing is, there is a great risk of a misalignment with the content that we produce with our brand. The inconsistencies that come from ChatGPT, at times, conflicting views. These are things that we need to be mindful. ChatGPT is an awesome tool, and it's one that we can leverage in order to give ourselves more time for creativity, more time to be effective. But there are risks that are associated with this that we need to be mindful of and mitigate in order to use it successfully. And you're probably wondering right now, like, why do these risks occur? The thing about large learning models is that they aren't without their weaknesses. The way that they work is they're trained by nature on a majority of the time, a generic model. What they don't have is an understanding of our brand. They don't understand what is the tone of voice that we use to try and cut through, what is our positioning, what does that sound like, who is our brand? And so we end up with these bland statements. What they need to be is they need to be trained manually in order to understand what it is that our brand is looking to achieve in the market and communicate through our content. Also, really interestingly, it lacks accountability, and there is a massive risk of inaccuracy and bias. A fascinating example of this was there was a lawsuit in America where a couple of lawyers used ChatGPT to create their bundle, if you will, which is all the documents you pull together for a case. And they used ChatGPT to reduce the workload, made sense. Turned out, what ChatGPT had done is it had created previous cases that referenced that weren't true. They didn't exist. Logically, it made sense. Because it's pattern recognition, it said, theoretically, this would have happened. Theoretically, this case would have existed. Therefore, it created it, and they used it. Complete falsehood. It didn't. There are a series of assumptions and biases built into this model which are inherent to it. Without the understanding of the context, you can't sift these out. These are one of the risks to our brands. For example, a colleague of mine asked ChatGPT to use a piece of software whether something was possible. It was, but ChatGPT said it wasn't. He researched it, found it was possible, sent it back to ChatGPT, and it did apologize, but damage done. And finally, there are ethical and privacy concerns. Put your hand up if you've heard of an instance where ChatGPT shares some information, or people use it in a way which they shouldn't have with private information. Okay, surprisingly few. There was a case with Samsung where there were a couple of developers that used ChatGPT to crawl through their code in order to identify bugs. Awesome idea. However, they used their base code. Samsung's IP, they made it public. It had massive implications. Sadly, they lost their jobs as a result of this. It's a really accessible tool, which is fantastic, but it makes your information open source. And it also doesn't have morality. It is not human. It doesn't understand the differences between, it doesn't understand the meaning of what it says. It doesn't have historical context. Many years ago, there was a chatbot created by Microsoft, which a Twitter account was created for, and you could interact with it. Sadly, what happened was very quickly it started to say unsavory things because it didn't have the understanding of morality, which, as we all know in our interactions with other humans, is a very grey area. So these are the challenges that you experience with using ChatGPT. And I hope through those examples, it's pretty obvious the implications to our brands. We spend a lot of time building up brand equity. That is super important for us. You need to understand the risks, the inherent biases that ChatGPT has in order to mitigate those and account for those. This isn't the only change. The really interesting thing about generative AI and AI changes in the rest of our world is search. Has anyone seen an example of how SEO is going to change or expected to change? Okay, a lot of you seeing this for the first time. It's going to change to an answer format. So rather than putting in searching for keywords and you get a bunch of findings, you put in a question and you get an answer. There is paid ads built into this and etc. Google and Bing don't have guidelines for this yet, but this is what it looks like. What it means for us is that we need to shift as marketers towards long-tail keywords, thinking about intent. How are we going to be this binary organization which shows up in the answer? And this, by the way, is the answer will show up before sponsored posts. So this is prioritized. So your takeaways, shift from keywords to intent and long tail. So we've spoken about some of the challenges, right, the context of where we are now, what's changing. How can we improve our conversions in this environment in the face of such changing landscapes? We spoke about that there is a lack of trust, there is a lack of patience, there is a lot of content we need to cut through. The marketing industry has been talking about this for an incredibly long time. the need for personalized experiences, a value exchange. This now is more important than ever. Are any of you familiar with the Sky 1% method? Very few. It was an idea in which the team would improve their activities by 1% each time. If it made a 1% improvement, cool, they do it. It was a cycling team. Eventually, they ended up winning races because they took that approach. There is so much competition now, so much content, so much fatigue. We need to make sure that we can find the edges in order to cut through from that sea of sameness. And this is why having an experience which meets, delights users' expectations is so important. How you do this is making sure you build the foundations of what you do on data-driven personas. You understand what are the user journeys that actually matter to your brand. What do you care about? The actions that you want your users to take. There's a lot of noise. Making sure you're focused on what matters, and ensuring you have a seamless user experience. What this is really about is the concept of cognitive dissonance. We have two different systems of thinking. We have fast thinking, we have slow thinking. Fast is our subconscious. It's when we go through and we make a purchase and someone asks you why, and you're like, I don't really know, felt right. That's why. When we engage system 2, that's when we reevaluate what we're doing. I'm sure everyone has gone to a basket and looked to buy something, but the link didn't work to checkout. And then we suddenly thought, why am I buying this? Well, that's when you engage system 2. And that is the whole point of a seamless user experience. You smooth the path to conversion. That is the whole point of this. And your competitors don't, well, then your audience is going to drop off and they'll come to you. So how do we actually do this? Well, it's all about understanding what does your audience actually care about? What is the function they're looking for from your audience? Sounds very simple. It isn't. You need to understand with your data-driven personas what they're looking to achieve. You need to be able to measure the content and the activities you put out there to understand what resonates. You think your persona cares about this particular topic, but you find out the content across all of your channels, SEO, your campaigns, whatever it is that you're using, you find out they're not actually interacting with that particular content topic. They're interacting with another. Or they're going to the website and you find they're spending all of their time in a particular type of blogs which doesn't match your expectations. It's important you can understand what the digital journey means to you as an organization and a brand and relate that to your understanding of personas. And really think about where along that journey there is friction so you can smooth that process. Don't get them to think. It's all about cross-referencing multiple resources so you can build up this picture. If you can't cross-reference, you don't truly understand what's resonating and what's not. The second is around content quality. And content quality is all about understanding the minutiae of what good looks like. So regardless of changes in marketing, the staple of what we do is content. Nearly every single activity we do drives to content, so this is the heart of what we do. Unless it's a obscure use case like e-commerce buying on social media. The majority relies on our content. As we said before, you need to understand what is actually helpful to your customer, what they care about. Focus on intent. This is where the market is going. It is not keywords. Understanding what is their intent throughout the journey. And that can help you think about the funnel. If you map out this content for this intent, this is what I think is going to be used in the funnel, you can start to understand and have some better attribution. And finally, leveraging your data to understand the engagement with the different activities you're doing, the different content types, topics, channels, tactics. And how you do this is being able to separate out your content. Essentially, marketing has a few factors to it. We have the channel, we have the topic, and then we have the way in which we're delivering that. You need to be able to separate out those different components of your content and the foundations it's delivered on to identify what's working and what's not. Cross-reference across your activities. If you cannot cross-reference, if you cannot measure what's working, what's not, you cannot improve it. That's the key point. Separate out the components, measure against. Benchmark for what good actually looks like, and match it against what's driving revenue. You need to understand the minutiae of what content is working and what isn't. If you're just seeing this from a top-level view and you can't dive into the specific components of your content, you can't improve it. And so finally, we've spoken about there are more channels, there's more content. we need to start looking at the ecosystem in a way in which we can put it together and understand the bigger picture. Marketing has this problem in which we have so much data, we really struggle with simplicity and understanding what matters to us to inform our decisions. So the emphasis here is build something that's integrated and ensure that journeys across your channels are seamless, that foundations are solid, you can understand what works and what doesn't, and get that holistic overview. I'm going to be honest, this isn't easy. If it was easy, we wouldn't be here listening about this. We've tried this ourselves. I recommend you check out our series, Marketers in Progress. We go through the challenges that we've experienced and how we've overcome these. And really interestingly, we've looked to use data to improve our creative. I recommend you checking it out. So the whole point of this is that your secret weapon is being able to understand your audiences, what users actually care about in a modular format, to identify what keeps them engaged and drives them through each aspect of that funnel. What does good look like? Does your company actually know what good looks like? How do you measure its success? Remember, you need to make it modular so you can separate and understand what works and what doesn't. When do your audience engage your content? Lunchtime, nighttime, what content is that? Does it differ? What methods are most effective? What is blocking your conversions? You spend all this time acquiring the traffic, but then you don't look at how do we smooth that process to conversion? And you're wasting a lot of time and energy that you spend upstream on those strategies and tactics. Make sure you understand your personas and you segment them solidly. Give them the content that resonates with them and be able to measure that and improve it. Map out the journeys that matter to you so you can measure against that and focus on the things that you care about and don't get lost in the noise. Finally, test what works. Amazon does thousands of these a day, supposedly. Everything's a maturity curve. This is the foundations you need in order to build upon to identify what works and what doesn't. The opportunity here, we did a bunch of analysis with customers with a professor from Germany, and essentially what they found is 28% increase in conversion rates from centralizing the marketing function, which is huge. Now I'm here to earn my keep now, which is explain to you how we do this. So we have a solution called Marketing Performance, which allows you to understand how do you acquire your audiences, how do you engage them with the experience and content you produce, and how to convert them. We'll save you time, giving you data that marketers understand, insights. We tell you what's not working, how to improve your conversions, what those blockers look like, data you can understand. And also, we have a capability coming out in Q4 to give you the tools you need to safely use generative AI, delivering on-brand content that's optimized for SEO. And so you can have the parameters you need to start engaging with ChatGPT. We have a bunch of capabilities that allow you to do this, from custom policies to identify specific messaging that's on brand and isn't, authentic, wider guidelines to make sure that there are no slip-ups using ChatGPT, all the way through to checking your content before it even goes live with pre-publish. Finally, this is my final slide. Marketing is a journey, and it's really complicated. The key to success is to break it down into components that you can focus on. The approach that we take is there are three main components to marketing, which is you have a solid foundation, a solid user experience you drive your traffic to, which is our inclusivity offering. You understand how to create content that actually resonates using ChatGPT, which is our content experience. And then finally, you understand the channels that actually convert, the ones that you need to counter for success. And this gives you that holistic oversight which you need to separate out the components of your efforts to identify what works and what doesn't. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be just behind you.